Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. It's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation with Janet Hanpeter as she shares about her trip to China and all the related adventures.
Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean go solo live? Have you ever been asked why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
And today I have with me Janet Hanpeter, otherwise known as Planet Janet. Welcome.
Hi, nice to be here, Jennifer.
Thank you for taking the time to share your stories with us today. I'm so excited.
Me too. It's going to be great.
So let's start with, you've had the travel bug in you for quite a good portion of your life. How would you say that really was born in you?
Boy, it's one of those, I think it was always there, but I was really blessed. I had this adventurous mother, and when we were growing up in high school, she planned a trip. This is way back in the late 60s to spend the summer in Europe for 2 months driving around. This is long before people did that sort of thing. And I was probably like last year of high school, and seeing Europe for 2 months, she unleashed a giant, or she unleashed whatever in me. And from that point, I was whatever I could see in the world. I think that started me.
I think that's fantastic. I actually have just started interviewing people for a series about mothers and daughters, and their and how, the moms are so inspirational and influential to getting their daughters to travel. So I love that the timeliness of this is saying, my mom.
Exactly. And she's still 92 and kicking. She's doing great.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
And do you think, when you think back to that time, do you think she knew what she was doing, or was she just trying to do something, unique and special?
She actually had an adventuresome spirit. In fact, back in her days, she went to college out of state as a math major, which was something you didn't do in the 40s.
So tell me what you think your mom was really thinking as she was going through this time. Do you think she was intending to really inspire you, that this was going to create this life of travel that you've now designed for yourself? Or was it just something special that she was doing for her kid?
I don't think it was intentional as the first thing, but she had this wanderlust spirit. In fact, what made it so amazing, as I found, my mom actually, back when she was in college, she got her private pilot's license. We asked her, why did you do that? And this was sort of during the war, but she was not a war person. She just liked to be up in the air. So she had a definite wanderlust spirit just to explore and see new places. So I think I was genetically instilled with that, as well as inspired by that. I know, amazing, isn't it?
I mean, I think there's a lot of women nowadays who would be hesitant to consider getting a pilot's license.
Right.
And to think, and you said your mom was how old?
She's 92 now, but this was in the 40s. She was during her first 2 years of college. And again, she went out of state from St. Louis to Indiana.
So she had that wanderlust in her.
Absolutely.
And do you know anything about when we talk about the idea of your mom going to school out of state?
Right.
How did that get received by the family? How many barriers did she have to overcome?
I don't actually know that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really speak to that, unfortunately.
No, that's okay. I just think that there's so much when your moms, and as I was saying, as we took a brief break, my grandmother has an amazing sense of adventure and spirit as well. And you just wonder, where did that come from, and how did that develop? And even more like, who else, generations before may have even inspired them?
Exactly. Well, one thing, my mom did lose her mom when she was age 10, I think, and was raised by her grandma until a stepmom came in. So maybe that helped her grow up fast and find her own inner resources and her own inner strength earlier than maybe most of us normal kids.
Absolutely. And did you have any siblings?
I did. I was the oldest, but a brother, sister.
Okay. So, looking at where they are now, do they have the same passion for travel that you do?
Not really. Not the international piece. My sister, her only son has just started college this week, but up to that, they would travel around the U.S. a lot and show them things. And they've been to maybe Europe a couple of times, and my brother and his wife, but nothing like the wanderlust that I have.
Well, fantastic. So when we talk about the whole aspect of travel and the adventure side of it, as well as the personal development side, I think they really do go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And as we were preparing for the show, you had already suggested a story that you wanted to start sharing about your trip to China.
Correct.
Why don't we go ahead and dig right in? That
would be great. Well, one thing you may said in the intro, one thing that really I think contributed to all of this is in my 30s, after I was a nurse, and then I also became a travel agent for 5 years because of this travel passion. And so that gave me a chance to travel even more over those earlier decades of my life. And so at that point, I traveled quite a bit to maybe a little Mexico, lots of Europe, and of course, the Caribbean. But I was approaching age 50 in the past, and I was starting to feel this desire to see more of the world. I knew Europe well, but once you're starting to hit midlife, you realize that, you're healthy, but you don't have 5 decades of travel ahead of you. You start to feel the clock ticking.
The clock is definitely ticking.
Definitely. I think all of us midlife people feel that. And so it's like, I've got a whole lot of countries and places I want to see on my bucket list, or I like to call it my travel dream list. And I got to get started here. So it was 2001 when I had that deep urge, I got to get out, and maybe I'd like to see Asia, but I hadn't really thought what I was exactly going to do. And I think the universe provides. Within about 2 weeks, I got an email from a girlfriend saying, "Oh, I just heard about this tour. You might be interested." And I opened it up, and it was a photography tour to China and Tibet. I remember back, it's been many years, but I just started hyperventilating. I thought, oh my God. As I read the itinerary, I just could not believe it. It spoke to me so loudly. I'd never been on a photography tour. I didn't know anything about who these people were. I knew no one. I didn't know the tour leader. But within 48 hours, I'd signed up and sent my money in.
Well, it does sound like serendipity. And the fact that someone who knows and cares about you, sent that to you saying, this sounds like you.
Absolutely. I'm so indebted to her. And so that later that year in September, I took off on a 24-person photography tour and to China and Tibet, as I mentioned. And there was something about that trip. It really was life-changing. And it was because as much as I love Europe, being in a place so exotic as China, and this is China back in 2001, and Tibet, my soul was on fire because I realized that the type of travel I love is the cultural travel, where there's so much culture that's so different from our Western world. The people are wonderful and they're friendly, and there's so much history, and the markets, and I just loved it. China itself was great. Going in the parks in the morning and seeing all the older people doing Tai Chi. And then when we hit Tibet, which is even more exotic, it was amazing. So that whole trip, I think, sparked my new real interest in not only seeing more of the world, but really seeing the places that are much, I guess I call it exotic because they're different culturally than ours. And so much of that is meeting the people.
Absolutely. And, that's one of the things that's so interesting. So what I want to make sure everybody hears is when we talk about this idea of solo travel, one of the ways that I define solo travel is that you didn't go with a friend, a family member, anybody else. You joined a tour, but you were still there in a solo manner.
Correct.
Right. And so, even though the tour has people kind of watching out for you, you're still there in many ways alone. And so you get to shape that experience as well.
Beautifully put, and absolutely, it's great. You've got that foundation of a tour, and there's parts where all 24 of you are together, and you've got your local guide who you're learning a lot from. But then there's always in any trip, and certainly in the China Tibet, there was lots of free time where we could go off on our own. And I ended up making a good friend on that trip. Turned out she was also from San Diego, but we met in Beijing, and now she was also living where I live. She's one of my closest friends now. But she and I would often go out and we'd walk around Lhasa in Tibet and go explore things together. So yes, there's that place is you're alone, but you're never alone.
Absolutely. And you can make friends if you want. So I love, now, are you still in touch with that friend actually?
Oh, absolutely. We're closest friends. I see her almost every week. It's amazing. It was one of those, again, I call it gift from God, but truly it was meant to be.
That is awesome.
It was very cool. So kind of the story then, that's sort of the preface. The actual tour itself ended in Hong Kong. But being the travel planner that I am, back when I signed up for it, I didn't know if I would ever get back to China. And the tour was good, but we didn't get to see everything. And one of the places that I just knew I couldn't live without seeing was the Li River area. And that's Li, Li River, which is these beautiful kind of rice paddy fields with these limestone peaks. Very, very serene. And really, when a lot of us have seen pictures of China, we're seeing this Li River area. We just don't know that's what it was. But I'd seen enough to go, oh my gosh, I couldn't go to China without seeing that. So I, in fact, then worked with the same tour operator planning the trip and had them plan my own solo extension to go back into China for 2 days to see the Li River on my own with a local guide.
That's fantastic. So again, you took charge of your opportunity, created it to be what you wanted when you are, and you're able to maximize it. Like we can only do that for ourselves. Nobody else is going to read our minds and have all the opportunities fall to us. We have to create that. And when you're solo, you're in charge of, the creating the opportunity as well as choosing not to.
Exactly. And that's one of my favorite things is even when any trip I take, when I might be a formal tour with friends or a photography tour, or even it might be off maybe 2 weeks, I will pull out a map of the world and say, okay, if I have one more week, where would I want to go afterwards? And that often ends up being my own self-planned trip. And sometimes it is actually going by myself to that destination. But it's like, as long as you've paid that airfare to get over to a certain part of the world, why not maximize your experience?
Absolutely. I love it. So carry on.
Yes, exactly. So the next part of the story is, of course, we finished the tour in Hong Kong. That morning, I said goodbye to all my travel mates, and they're heading off to the airport to fly home. And I had a few hours before I was heading back to the airport in Hong Kong to fly into Guilin, which is sort of the gateway city for Li River. And I was very excited, and I knew I was going to have a guide waiting for me. But there was a piece of me like, I'm in Asia. This is kind of scary. But, by the time I'd actually gotten there and traveled a bit there, I wasn't so scared. So that afternoon, I took the hotel kind of airport shuttle bus out to the Hong Kong airport to catch my 7:00 flight to Guilin. Check in early, as you're supposed to, of course, at the Dragonair counter, and hand them my ticket, my passport, my China visa. And they look at everything and they go, excuse me, ma'am, but you can't get on this airplane. You don't have a multiple entry visa. You can't come back into China. And I'm standing in that corner going, oh my God, what do I do now? I have to admit that was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. I'm now completely on my own in Hong Kong. Again, I haven't traveled much in Asia. I'm not in Europe. I'm definitely a fish out of water. And there I am.
Wow.
Wow. That which does not kill you only makes you stronger.
True statement.
True statement. But I do remember at the airport trying to go and make a phone call to the tour operator that had planned this. They had the office in Beijing. Well, I couldn't get the phones to work. You're in a different. So I do what I often do when I'm in any of those situations is I've learned to take a deep breath and just, I can do this. That's one of my favorite mantras, no matter what the situation is. And that helped me kind of get out of the fear and into my problem-solving mind. And so it's like, well, okay, obviously, I took the shuttle back to the hotel and checked asked to basically check back in for the night while I could problem solve all this. And essentially the next less than 24 hours was quite a bit of a scramble and a little bit scary, but everything worked out. People were helpful. The hotel staff let me know that there was a travel agency nearby that tomorrow morning I could go and get a one-day visa so I could fly back to China, because the flight to Guilin was every day at 7, which is what I was able to do. So the next day I was there. They helped me rearrange my flights. They got me my one-day visa. People helped me go to a cyber cafe. This is again in 2001. We didn't have smartphones, and we didn't have quite the access that you do now. They helped me figure out how to do Yahoo email for the first time, so I could email my tour operator to let them know I wasn't coming to Guilin that night and not to be waiting for me. So anyway, it all got rearranged after a lot of, anxiety on my part. But then I went to the airport the next day, got on my flight at 7 o'clock into Guilin, arrived at 8. There was my lovely guide, Lisa, and my driver waiting for me at the airport to pick me up. And just this weight was off my shoulder. I was now in rural China, and what ended up being the most magical 2 days of one of the most magical 2 days of my life.
Absolutely. And, sometimes the stories are stronger and the memories are better when you have had that holy cow moment.
Yes. Yes. I mean, we all know when you're traveling, whether it's US, Europe, Asia, it doesn't matter. And the best laid plans, things just happen.
They do.
And we're always going to be in those situations like, oh my God, what do I do? And it always works out. People step forward. You do your part, but people really are there to help. And it's amazing how little angels just emerge that guide you into what you need to do to fix things.
Absolutely. But you have to be paying attention.
Yes, right. You have to be very involved in problem solving. Exactly. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So kind of continuing just the piece of the story that makes it which ended up being such a magical thing. The next day, Lisa, delivered me to the hotel, and the next morning we met and we went to the Lee River cruise. So she was with me on that together. So it was this lovely 5-hour cruise down this beautiful Lee River through this amazing rural countryside with the limestone peaks and the water buffalo and the little villages. And it's so scenic. It's really a very famous place to do. And then the boat always lands in the city of Yangshuo, which is this charming, Guilin's a big city, but Yangshuo is this charming little town, very sleepy. And the boats all end up there. And most of the time, people that are the tourists that are on the boat just take the 1-hour bus ride or whatever back to Guilin, but they arranged for me to actually stay in Yangshuo for the night. And so Lisa walked me, we walked the 5 minutes from the boat dock to the cute little hotel they had arranged for me. Small, simple, but family run, friendly staff. They spoke some English. She dropped me off and said, great, I will see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock. I had 24 hours on my own. Here I was in Yangshuo by myself in this beautiful, protected, safe, charming environment. And I got to make my time what I wanted to be for the next 24 hours as a solo traveler, but in still a very protected environment.
Absolutely. And I think that's, being aware of what makes sense. And I think safety consciousness.
Right.
What was the language gap like? How did you experience that? How did that emerge through some of these challenges?
Gotcha. Well, yes, that's always the challenge, particularly. What's great is when you're in a big city like Hong Kong, even Guilin, and you're in kind of tourist-oriented areas, you're dealing with often finding people that speak English, particularly at your hotel. So that was not a problem. And then I think she arranged for me in Yangshuo, again, the hotel did speak some English. And they have been on the backpacker circuit. That's Little Yangshuo back in 2001. They had already been on the backpacker circuit for maybe 20 years. So they were used to foreigner backpackers coming in. So those that were dealing with the quote tourists knew enough English. So it worked out. And then there's always the sign language, but generally you're always looking for those that kind of deal with travelers so that there's some semblance of English enough spoken to get your basic needs met.
Absolutely.
Then one of the stories that afternoon, kind of on that same subject, I went out exploring that afternoon. I had a few hours, and on the way, this lovely woman in her 30s, a local Yangshuo woman, approached me, and she introduced herself, and she spoke very good English. She said, "My name is Shirley. I'm a tour guide, and I do biking tours. I take guide people around on bicycles, and we can explore the area." And she told me more, and then she showed me her adorable little notebook that was filled with testimonials of all her happy clients. And I remember one of them was an OBGYN from Dallas, raving
Okay.
about Shirley. And I went, okay, you sold me. And so we made the arrangement. The next morning, she was going to meet me back at my hotel at 8 o'clock in the morning with 2 bicycles, and we're going to go touring. So that was number one great thing that happened in Yangshuo. And then second, I went to the main little park there and went just walking around the park. Of course, I was on a photography tour, so I had my big SLR camera. And so I'm just walking around, just looking and exploring and seeing like normal daily life in the park. And I came across 4 local men playing cards, and they motioned me over. They spoke no English, but they big smiles motioned me over, and I was watching them play cards, and I'm taking photos. And all of a sudden, this whole crowd of people are gathered around me, because here's this foreigner in a park that's not usually got foreigners. They're usually down by the boat dock.
Sure.
And they're fascinated by me and my camera. And then very soon, this young man named David approaches, and he spoke English. So he starts translating for me and the group, and we start chatting. And then after that's done, he offers to give me a tour. So he and I just walked through the park. He took me up on a cool hilltop to show me the sights. And, after about an hour together, we bid adieu. But just this incredible heart-to-heart interaction I had with both the local people and this sweet young man, David, who was always happy to practice their English. And so that was, those are those moments that somehow the language barrier doesn't seem to be much of a problem.
That's the example here, is that we perceive
Correct.
that it will be.
Correct.
I recently was in France, and the only language I have a semblance of speaking is Spanish.
Yes,
me
too.
So I felt like whenever I was not understanding how to speak their language, my only option was to speak Spanish to them poorly. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. But again, it's a society nowadays where language just does not have to be that barrier that it certainly was when we started traveling years and years ago.
Yeah, you're so right. And it has been, as you and I have both seen, we are blessed to be English speakers, because that has absolutely by de facto become really the universal language of our world, and particularly in travel. Even like on, maybe later we might talk about it, on the Community de Santiago, where you've got people from all over the world traveling, and that ends up Spanish, of course, is Spain, you're in Spain, but if people don't speak Spanish, often between travelers, they may be from Korea and you might be from the US, English is really the common language. So we are very lucky as English speakers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the story the next day, even though this whole experience was incredible, the bike ride with Shirley was absolutely the icing on the cake. That 5 hours. So again, she picked me up, I guess, was that what you say? She showed up with the bicycles at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we took off, and it was so idyllic. Again, this is China back in 2001. I think rural China is still fairly rural China. City China now looks hyper modern, but we're on these. Once we get out of town, we're on these just little roads going through rice paddies and rice fields, and just soon out of town, we're seeing all these people from the countryside walking into town, because it's market day. So they're carrying all their goods on their backs, those, the wooden sticks that people wear across their shoulders with the buckets hanging down, and bicycles and carts, and, just getting a life of what's market day in rural China look like. And we're going past duck ponds, because of course, Peking duck is a big thing. So they're growing their ducks, and fish ponds, and not only rice fields, but other kinds of agriculture. And we were going through little villages that were small. And so it was so peaceful, and it was so beautiful. And one point we stopped and there was a woman that was by her water buffalo and she was posing for pictures, or she was posing with her water buffalo. So of course I had to get a picture. She was just adorable. And that photo of her by that water buffalo is still hanging on my living room wall all these years later. I mean, those are just memories that, I'll never forget.
That's awesome.
And we went a little further and Shirley pointed out, she goes, look here, there was a mama water buffalo who had just given birth 10 minutes, as she estimated before that. And here was a newly born water buffalo with the umbilical cord still attached, with these wobbly little feet trying to walk around, making these cute little grunty sounds. And we stopped and the little water buffalo came over to me and let me kind of pet him on the head.
Wow.
And Shirley said she'd never seen such a newly born water buffalo before. That was just this other magical moment. It's like, I'm trying to think. I probably do have a picture of the little water buffalo. Don't have that on my wall, but that was neat. And then we just continued over those next 5 hours. We went up to, walked up the top of a beautiful moon hill where it's the place you go to get really great views back down over this incredible, gorgeous countryside. We went into a dragon cave where I got a 45-minute tour, 2 Chinese couples and me with the local guide who actually spoke some decent English.
Nice.
And later wanted to see if we could be pen pals because they were as fascinated. This again is 2001. They're so fascinated by foreigners and particularly Americans. They really loved us back. They still love us, I'm sure. And so that was the bike ride. But as she and I are biking, we're just learning about each other's lives. And I'm finding out that, she's got she's married. Her husband's a farmer. She's a full-time tour guide. That's how she's making her living. She learned her English just by all the tourists that she's met. And now she says she's got friends all over the world. And she's been able to do it. She's got the 2 kids. And so we're just talking, and it was very fascinating, or they were so fascinated by me. Here I am, a 50-ish woman by myself in China. And then they were so fascinated to find out that I was not married and I've never had children. They just could not comprehend that.
I hear ya.
Because that is not something that's done in most other countries.
Exactly.
And then, and the thing I will most remember as we're cycling along talking about that, and she finds out I don't have children, I'm not married. She goes, oh my God, who's going to take care of you when you get old? And I said, Shirley, that's one damn good question. I have no idea. I guess I have to be good to my nephews, but
exactly.
It's because of course their family's this Chinese. I think the in-laws live with them and her brother's parents, or her parents live with her brother. That's just how it's done in China. And I think in many parts of the world, the whole family connections, but America is kind of a foreign animal to them.
It is. And the attitudes and certainly, in some cases, the waste. I mean, I have learned so many amazing lessons just from how other countries view their scarce resources.
Correct. Yeah.
And so it's, in some ways, it certainly makes you feel a bit privileged when you travel and they don't know better, we don't know better. And then you realize that there's a gap and it's like, oh yeah, this is different at least.
Yeah, they really don't. And even Shirley, it always surprised me. And she, as good as her English is and all the people she's met around the world, she's never been outside of Yangshuo and Guilin, the town, 1 hour away. That's been her world. And that's true, as as you've seen, of course, Jennifer, so many other people in the world. But so as we finished the bike ride, Lisa, my guide, and the driver were there waiting for me. I said goodbye and just thinking that those 5 hours that I spent with Shirley were some of the most special moments of my life, because it was seeing the culture up close and personal, learning her life, really feeling like I made a friend and having these incredible heart-to-heart connections that are priceless. You can go see the Eiffel Tower, you can go see the Great Wall, and absolutely you should. And I love those are great experiences, but that's not all travel. It's really the people, to me, that makes it.
That's exactly what it is. The people and taking the time to, have that conversation and learn a little bit about the locals. And it can be as simple as, this is what we do. What do you do? You can do the where should I go eat and why? Like, what do you love? But that sitting down and actually having some coffee or something and sharing a bit more about yourself and your culture and being willing to listen to others, that's actually the invaluable part of the travel.
It really is. Your eyes get open and you can never close them again. It's so important for all of us. That's why you do what you do, Jennifer, and why I do what I do is travel, I think, is transformative, not only just for us personally, but just how we view the world. And I think if one of the comments, my minister actually in the past had the blessing of being able to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama in kind of a group where a group of spiritual people were trying to talk with him and asked him, how do you bring peace in the world? And he said, well, really one way is you travel and make friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what's amazing is our world keeps getting smaller as some of the technology continues to improve. So when I think about, this next generation, and I've led 2 studies abroad, and I look at the connections that these students who come from all over the US, when they're traveling, they're making friends in the hostels who are also coming from all over the world.
Right.
And they're going to stay connected.
Yes.
And it's so much easier to now say, I have a person here. And so I actually, at one point, I wonder to what degree people will even feel like they're still traveling solo, because they will have, created friends all over the place.
Right. And I think absolutely that's one of the great ways to travel is as you make those friends that you've got somebody to visit. And I've done that many times. Many times people say, oh, come visit sometime. And they go, oh, yeah, I will. They never do it. Well, for probably you and me, they need to be careful if they say that, because you and I will take them up on that offer because there's nothing like visiting a person that you met in their environment. And now you get to meet their friends and,
well, meeting them in their natural habitat, and I mean that in the kindest way possible, because when you're traveling, you also can assume a little bit of a different attitude, personality, and things like that. But when you're at home, there's something very real about that. And wanting to share your home, your home country, your home state, whatever that is, with someone else, I think it gives you a deeper appreciation for what that is as well.
Yes, very, very true. Very true. And maybe one more story I just thought of on the way back, still in Yangshuo, is that first evening as I'd gone out to dinner, just at a sweet little restaurant. I think it was called Cafe on the Moon. Very cute. As I was walking back, some young girls kind of stopped me because, of course, I'm a foreigner. And it turned out they were middle school students from Yangshuo, and they were in English class, and they wanted to talk to me and they wanted to practice their English. And we had so much fun chatting for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And when they found out that I was traveling by myself, they said, good for you. And then they even invited me to a party the next day, but I was going to be gone. But it's like, nice. Oh my goodness, here they, these sweet little middle school students. And if I'd been in town, I would have gone to their party.
Absolutely. And again, being open to whatever that may be. And certainly the people.
Yeah. And on solo, those cases, if I had been with maybe 2 other friends, those girls may not have approached me. So there is definitely something, as you know, when you're solo at the maybe most one other person, you're more approachable than when you're with a larger group. So it gives you much more opportunity to meet the local people when you're by yourself.
Absolutely. That is fantastic. Janet, I know we've just gotten to the tip of the iceberg with all of your adventures, but I want to make sure that people know where they can find you. So they can keep up with everything that you have done in the past, as well as what's coming up next for you. Where can they find you?
You bet. Well, they can find me at my travel blog and website, which is planetjanettravels.com. So I'd love to have anybody drop by and check out all the different blog posts I've written about all my different adventures around the world and different stories and travel tips. And then I also I just call it the weekly update, but you could sign up for my free weekly update. I'd love you to do that as well. And I send out just each week a short kind of e-newsletter, very short, easy to read, that highlights one of my current blog posts and it has this photo of the week as well as a travel tip of the week. So they can sign up on the homepage of the website. So love them to do that.
Thank you. And where are you off to next?
Actually, I am home for a while. I had last year. I'd had way too much. I'm not wait. There's never too much travel, but my most recent trip was to Antarctica, which was sort of a trip of a lifetime. And so I'm staying home for a while to help to pay for that. But I'm going back next May, so to go back and walk the Camino in Spain again. I went last year and walked the second half of the Camino de Santiago in Spain, as you know. And I want to go back next year and walk the first half. I want to see what I missed. So that's really my next big trip.
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait to see what you continue to be up to. And I appreciate you taking the time to share your stories with us today.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's been a real pleasure. Appreciate it.
Wasn't it great to hear the stories that Janet shared with us today? It's important to remember that knowing the language isn't as important as wanting to know the people. If you love these stories and want to help support Go Solo Live, you can do that by making a small financial contribution to the show. There are a lot of options with some great gifts of appreciation. Just go to patreon.com/Go Solo Live to show the love. That's patreon.com. Well, sisters, we've reached the end of today's episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Follow us on Twitter at Go Solo Live or find us in Facebook at Transform Via Travel. If you like what you've heard, please don't hesitate to share this podcast with your friends. Also, we'd love to hear reviews in whatever program you've used to listen to this podcast. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me at Jennifer@transformviatravel.com. And until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.